This past year in 2024, I grew cauliflower for the first time successfully. I learned a lot from it. There were some bumps along the way, so to speak, and so I want to talk about two of those main challenges that I faced, and then talk about some plans in 2025 of how I might continue to do certain things or change certain things with how I grow cauliflower to grow them even more successfully in 2025. The first lesson that I learned from cauliflower in 2024 was rodents. When I initially planted the cauliflower out into the garden, and actually I transplanted it, I had started the cauliflower indoors and it did very well. And then I transplanted it out in the garden, and eventually I learned that the rodents really love cauliflower. You know, rabbits, mice, voles, rats, you name it. And in the beginning, I was beginning to lose a lot of cauliflower just from that alone. So at first I tried to do like a hot pepper tea spray where I would take like cayenne pepper or some type of hot pepper. And cayenne pepper is really kind of mild, I guess, in comparison to some of the other hot peppers out there that maybe I could have used. And so I would just put that in like hot water, heat it up, and then let it cool down, put that in a spray bottle and spray it on the plants. And that may have had some deterrent effect, but the effect didn't really seem to be that strong enough because there still ended up being a pretty good amount of damage to a lot of the plants. I did kind of resort to just sprinkling hot pepper on some of the plants, the cayenne pepper, and that could kind of be effective, but not necessarily always either. You know, there might be a spot I miss and then it would like be bitten off at the base or whatever. And plus, if it rained, some of that would like wash off. So it ended up not really being much of an option, at least not a very effective option, right? So I ended up using more of a physical barrier, physical deterrent, and that was like cages, right? That I made little round cages out of chicken wire and put them around each individual plant, right? And it's important that you make them wide enough so that the plants can grow and fill out, and then also so that, you know, rodents and small animals can't reach in through the chicken wire to grab the plant and, you know, start eating it or anything like that. So it's also really important when you set up those cages, I've learned, to make sure that they're on, you know, flat ground, as flat as possible, and better yet, even stake it down into the ground at multiple points of contact for each cage. So that helps to deter a lot of rodents from trying to sneak under the wire to get at the plant. And then additionally, another thing that I was trying to work on long term, and still am actually kind of even now in the fall and into the winter, is maximizing open spaces and kind of minimizing cover around those areas or nearby. Places where there's going to be more shade or more weed pressure or you know, just a denser growth in general is going to attract a lot more rodents in those areas because they are going to feel safer from a lot of other predators, right? Especially the predators that are avian, right? That can see from above. So that cover kind of helps give these rodents a sense of safety and protection. So it's beneficial to try and minimize that in the areas where we want to grow these crops. So that's another good deterrent aspect that we can use and that I'm kind of experimenting with and working with, right, to help reduce the pressure, right? Also, you know, allowing foxes and coyotes and stuff into the area, letting them do their thing is very helpful to control some of these rodent populations too. And also, if there are a few friendly neighborhood cats, that I found that to be a added bonus too. So the second challenge that I had with cauliflower, I believe, was earwigs, right? I certainly saw them on the plants under the cauliflower heads, right? Because they also like those damp, shady conditions, and those dense cauliflower heads or curds, as they're technically called, provide that optimal habitat for earwigs. Now, I don't know if the earwigs were actually the problem. I don't know if the cauliflower was already suffering from rot or a different pest initially, which caused some of that tissue in the cauliflower plant to degrade, and maybe the earwigs were just opportunists, or maybe the earwigs also can be a beneficial insect in some cases and go after some pest insects, right? And were they going after a pest insect at that point? I don't know. But they certainly made the cauliflower a lot less aesthetically pleasing and not quite so enticing to consume. Right, so one thing that really worked well with me was make sure that I am harvesting the cauliflower curds, those heads, promptly when they reach their full size, which for me initially kind of took some time to determine what was ripe for a cauliflower, and just to get out there and harvest them as soon as they are ready, and not waiting any longer, because that way they're not sitting out in the field for a longer period of time. And of course, if there are earwigs in there, you know, you might be able to take the cauliflower and dunk it in water to help remove the earwigs. And then the other thing that can help, that I didn't really have too much time to do when the cauliflower was growing, was to minimize the surrounding cover, right, the vegetation, because that can help give a shaded, damp kind of habitat that's very conducive for the earwigs. So that probably would have helped me out a lot, not just with the rodents, but also with the earwigs. So some people have also used diatomaceous earth, where they sprinkle those around the plants. That can be effective for earwig control in some cases, but you also have to remember that diatomaceous earth is not necessarily discriminatory with what type of insect it attacks, right? It may also negatively affect predatory ground beetles, which are very beneficial, and they move on the ground. And that's just one example. So I don't know if I necessarily recommend that as an option. A few other things that Helena Tao has mentioned in The Ecological Farm, which is a tremendous book that I highly recommend you get. I have a link to it down in the description, and she's recommended placing out rolled up newspaper nearby where there are a lot of earwigs in a garden, and they will go to the newspaper because that'll be like a damp, dark environment of protection, and then you can remove the newspaper. And then she also mentions you can do a similar thing with cans of oil and water mixed together, right? I mean, they don't mix, but in the same container, and then that could be used to trap earwigs as well. So overall, I don't know if the earwigs were actually the problem or not, but it seemed like the cauliflower was rotting, and maybe they were kind of feeding off of that as like a secondary type pest in that context. So just to kind of like reduce some of these issues and maintain a sense of balance, this is kind of what I'm going for here in terms of managing the earwig problem, really optimizing the environment and the health of the plants, and not so much going after the earwigs, because, you know, they're not necessarily bad in all cases. So regardless, even if earwigs were not the problem, you know, we can still use some of these techniques like prompt harvesting and minimizing surrounding cover to help benefit the growth of the cauliflower plants, and also probably deter some rodents at the same time, right? So just using some of these general practices can be beneficial. So thank you so much for checking out this video on what I've learned from growing cauliflower in 2024. Each different crop has a unique personality, different character traits. They come from different areas around the world, and so they have different needs, right? And so it's all about getting to know each type of crop that we grow. And the more we learn, the more successful we will be at growing these different crops. So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.